All right, welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at three new options inside of Adobe Lightroom Classic. And those are lens blur, effects, and color grading. And make sure you stay to the end of the video because in the last portion of this video, I'm going to take an image and I'm going to do all these different toning effects and some other things that we've learned along the way. And we're going to start with an image and then I'm going to have a different completed image in the end. All right, so we have a new image up here, and today we're going to be taking a look at three different options. I'm going to go ahead and close this. We're going to take a look at the lens blur, effects, and up here color grading, and we're going to do them in the order that makes the most sense. So we're going to do lens blur first, then probably effects, and then we're going to go ahead and take a look at color grading. But the first thing we need to do is just do a basic adjustment here. We're going to come in here and hit auto just to see what this does. That did warm it up a little bit. Let me make it brighter so I can see if I like that. Maybe we slide this back to cool it off. I actually like this image a little bit cooler. And truthfully, we're going to color grade it. So doing a lot of this isn't going to be super helpful. I'm also going to go ahead and boost up the blacks just to get some more detail out of that. And that looks okay. That's good enough for now. We're not going to do any selective adjustments or anything like that. So we're going to come down here to something that's new, and I'm going to go ahead and close the basic panel so it's easy for everybody to follow along. We're going to click on lens blur right here. And the first thing you need to do is you see this little apply. We're going to select that. And so it's using AI to analyze this image. And what it's going to create is something called a depth blur. Now, depth blur has been in Photoshop for a while. It's something that we have used. And the idea is this: traditionally, if I wanted to blur the background, I would select the subject and then I would do a Gaussian blur. But the blur would be all the same. The whole background, it would be completely even. And that always doesn't give us the most natural look. And a lot of times there's objects in front of us or closer to us, and we don't want those to blur as much as they do in the background to give us more of a natural look. So the way blur usually works is we have what we call depth of field, right? And so the further you get back into the field, the more it's going to get blurred. And so in this case, it's trying to represent that. So we're going to come over here where it says visualize depth and click this little box. And what this is going to show us is in colors. So the subject is this yellow area, and you can see right here, this is what's being selected. In the background is the depth of the blur. So the lighter color here is going to get less blur than this area here where it's really dark. Now we can control that. It's picked it automatically by sliding this around. So if I actually wanted the background to blur, I could select that. So let me turn this off and so you can see what it looks like. So now you can see that we're blurring the foreground, not the background. And if I come in here and I slide this back to where it should be, which is right there, you can see this is not being changed. If I want to control that, I can slide these little sliders around to adjust where I actually want that to be selected at. It does do it specifically. We also have a brush refinement tool that kind of lets us go in here. We can control what is in focus and what is in blur. So you can manually paint that in. So if I wanted to make something in focus, I could come in here. This would be dumb, but I could kind of paint this area in, and that area now wouldn't be getting the blur, even though it has a little bit of it naturally in the photo. I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. It's not something that we want. All right, so this is controlling that. Now up here we have the blur amount, so I can go to the left, and that's going to give us no blur, even though it's selected. And in this case, because we have sort of a busy background, if I want to really blur, I can go up here and increase that blur so we have more blur in the background. So we've got our subject here. We've got some blur going on in the background. But truthfully, there's a lot going on in this photo, and it's sort of distracting. So we're going to come down here to effects. And here we have vignetting. So vignetting is essentially just darkening the outside of an image. Or you can go the other way and make it white if you wanted. We can control where that point starts and stops by sliding this. We can make it either more round or more square, depending on how we want it. And we could make that transition hard or soft, depending on what we want to do. Now, I'm just going to do a little bit just so we have it in here, but I don't think this needs it a lot. So the darkening on the edge is going to help us kind of subdue this background. All right, so this subject does need to be brightened up a little bit. So let's come in here and select our subject. All right, so it's created that mask. Let's go ahead and brighten her up a little bit. That looks pretty good. We'll go with that. We'll click back here on our global adjustments. We're gonna close out of the lens blur and close out of effects just so it's easier for you to see what's doing. And we're gonna go in here to what's called color grading. Now, I will tell you I actually prefer to do this in Photoshop, but I'm gonna show you how to do it here. You have a whole lot more control in Photoshop, and you can create what's called actions that do these effects, and yeah, I like them better. So I can actually add that depth blur into a one-click action in Photoshop. All right, so the way this works is we're gonna add a different color to the shadows and a color to the highlights. We could do it in the midtones, but yeah, that's not something you normally do. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna add some blue to the shadow areas and some orange to our highlights. And so what this is doing, it's overlaying on the color. It's splitting by adding a color in the shadow areas and a color in the highlight areas. And you'll see this a lot on filters and programs like Instagrams or on phones or whatever, right? So we're getting these colors. Muted green is another one that you see. There's just a whole bunch of different ways, split tone an image. Now, in this case, we are split toning. However, we're overlaying it on the original color. So we're gonna come up here and we're gonna go to black and white. And then we're gonna come down here and we're gonna slide this orange out. And in this case, we're still split toning the image. We're still having the blue here and the yellow in the highlights, but we're doing it over no color in the background, all right? And we can change the blending. So if we want more of it to be either on the shadow side or the highlight, how we affect that, we can do that there. We can also do the balance. So if we've got too much blue in the shadows, we can come and we can shift it over so we get more of the orange coming out, more of the midtones and highlights, depending on how we want it. So if I wanted to isolate just to the shadows, I click that button and then you see down here, we have the ability to pick that color, but we can refine it even from there. We can take some of the color out or increase the saturation, luminance and stuff like that so we have more control. And then I can click on the highlights and I'm doing essentially the same thing. If it is, and this is a little bit oversaturated, I can lower that saturation on that color, kind of move it around and get it exactly where I want it. All right, so I've go ahead and I've opened this image up already, and we already have a really, really strong depth of field, but we're gonna enhance that. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit apply, and you can see it's already done this. So I can control that blur amount just by doing this. So if I wanna soften that background and throw it more out of focus, I can do that. Right here, I've got a whole bunch of different ways that you can configure these little circles right here. So as I click on this, you're going to see them change shape a little bit. So we're just clicking through and they're changing shape, and it's adjusting the manner in which you see the different effects to soften it. And you can come in here and you can slide her around. You can increase the boost, decrease the boost, and kind of play around and get the different effect that you want with the background of this image. And so what we're doing here is, if you look here at the beginning, we're going from kind of this gritty look to more of a soft look in the background. There's no right or wrong way when it comes to a manual. There's no right or wrong way when it comes to adding effects like this to your images, but this is basically how you can control it. Sometimes this bokeh effect will really manipulate or enhance what is almost bokeh, but not quite there yet. So you kind of have to play around with it. There are images where you can go in, like with this one. So if you bring up an image like this that has a lot of it already, and we come in here and we turn this on and off, you pretty much won't see any changes because it's about as drastic as you can get. So in some images, you're going to see a big adjustment. In other images, you're going to see a slight adjustment. All right, so we have this image here, and let's kind of take what we've learned over a series of tutorials and see if we can improve this image. So the first thing that we have here is this. This is going to be an issue. So we're going to take that remove tool. We're going to come in here and we're just going to paint over that area. So I've grabbed the remove tool. We're just going to select this area and we're going to hit remove. AI is going to go through and it should essentially delete that and get rid of it. So you can see that area is gone. Let's click back here. In this image, I want the red color, but I really don't want any of the other colors. So let's go ahead and start getting rid of stuff. So we're going to tap green. We're going to take the saturation and just make that black and white. I'm going to do that for the cyan because there's a little bit of these colors in the steps, and that looks pretty good. Looks like we've got a little bit of yellow kind of hanging around here. So let's go into the yellow. If we go to the right, we see where it is, and let's just kind of suck some of that out. And it looks like we've got a little bit of orange, but I think if we get rid of all the orange, it's going to look wonky. This is the issue where doing stuff in Photoshop would be helpful. So we're going to turn on the visual depth adjustment, and what that's going to do is just kind of show us the depth blur that it's automatically created. And all right, so in this case, I want to blur this. I want this one to be dark because I want this totally out of focus, and I want more blur here because I want the blur to sort of start here and go this way. So I have a couple of different options. Right here, we've got this little face in the point. So this is like the text subject, and that's probably what it used. So the way this works is I can come here, you can see it highlight on that. I can click on it and it gives me that little plus, and I can be like right there on that eye. That's where I want the critical focus to be. And then I want you to start blurring, and it changed it a little bit, but not a lot. I can also come in here and change the range. So I'm going to grab this and start sliding it over. I'm going to do the same thing with this side. I can slide that over to adjust it. Okay, that looks better. So that's going to give us a stronger blur here and more in focus here. But I want to increase that. So we're going to click on the blur tool, and the amount, let's just try 100, right? The trick here is we want a really strong feather. So the distance between the outer and inner lines, we want that to be strong because we don't want this to be too dark. And I'm just going to go over here and just start painting in areas. Right? It's not dark enough, so I'm going to take the amount and I'm going to slide it. Get something that I like. And then I'm going to hit the plus because I want to do another one, and we're going to come in here and do this over again, up closer to her. So you can see we're really starting to blur this area more. Let's hit the plus, and I'm going to make this blur amount as strong as I can get it. And I want to come in here and get rid of this. All right, so I want that to blur a lot. So that looks pretty good. So now we're going to go in and turn the visualize depth off. And this is going to give us the blur. You can see it's definitely blurring that a whole lot more. So if I take the blur out, this is where it was, but I just want it to come out. So let's increase that blur. The bokeh is not really going to do too much in this image, so we're just going to leave it. We're really just interested in this blur. And I can tell you already, this black and white stuff here is really distracting in this image. So let's go back into this remove tool and see how well it does. Notice we've got use generative AI on this, and we've got this remove tool, and we're going to make this big, and we're going to actually get rid of it. We'll see how well it does, how well it's going to understand some of these areas, but we're going to try it because maybe it will work. And let's go ahead and click remove and see what the program can do. So it's just going to look, analyze that image, and try to recreate and blend in what it should look like. All right. So is it perfect? No, but it's better than what it was. It gets rid of that dark area. Probably going to come in here and crop this a little bit. So we're going to go hit the crop tool. And I'm just going to simply crop just a little bit of that off. I'm going to hit return and apply that. So now I've got this dress. Okay. We could go in if we didn't like the way it did it and do it a couple of times to see what we can get. But in general, I think this is looking better than what we had before. Next, we're going to go in here. We're going to click the masking tool. And I'm literally just going to use the brush because I just want to take this area right here and brighten that up a little bit. So we're going to brighten the face up a little bit. We're going to take the highlights down a little. All right, that looks even more even. So that looks pretty good. Let's click back on the global adjustments. We're going to close the lens blur. We're going to come down here to effects, and we're going to grab and we're going to blur out the bottom. Okay, this is the issue. When I'm doing this, it's darkening her face because it's spilling over, but it's not working here because it's a global adjustment. So when something doesn't work, I'm going to remove it. I think that's key. You can just double click here and it will remove it. So we could hit the letter K, and I could go in here and select that face. And I could go down here a little bit if I wanted as well. So we're selecting that area. So I've made this mask. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to invert this mask. And then I'm going to come down here to the bottom, and we're going to go back to those effects. So this is how you do that same thing in Photoshop. So I've selected everything but her face, and now when I do that vignette, it's only going to affect the areas that kind of have that reddish color to it. It's not going to do it over her face. So it's going to vignette here, but not in this location. So now I click back on the image, you can see it's vignetted and darkened that edge out there, but it hasn't affected this area here, which is what I wanted. Now it's looking a little bit dark overall. So I think I'm going to come in here with the brush again, hit the letter K, and we're just going to brush over the face, and we're going to lighten this up a little more. So we'll come over here to exposure, and we're just going to brighten that up a little bit. Maybe we'll try the shadows to open that up. Yeah, that's looking better. And we're kind of isolating the face. Now, I think I might have painted a little bit here on the hand that I don't want that. So I'm going to hit subtract brush, because it looks like the hand's getting a little brighter than I want it to be. And that looks better. So we're darkening that area there. So let's come on over here, and you'll notice that we have reference view, but right here where we have these two Y's, if I select this, it's going to give us a before and after of what our image looked like. So we started with our image looking like this here on the right hand side, and by manipulating that image, we've slided over here, and we've got a completely different look in that image. So I'm going to click back here to get this image. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at our color grading. So the last thing we're going to do is we're going to come in here to the global adjustments, and I'm going to add a little bit of blue to the shadow areas of this image. It's going to change the color of the dress a little bit. It's going to give us a cooler look, all right, and a little bit more stylized than we had before. So I'm not going to add anything to the highlights because I think that's going to look weird. I could go in here and kind of play around with it, but that's what we've done. So let's go ahead and take a look at the before and after again. So this is our before, right is our after. This doesn't mean this is the perfect edit for this image. This is just one way to manipulate an image and get a completely different look by using the different adjustments that we've learned here in Adobe Lightroom Classic. Well, I hope you learned a little bit about color grading, effects, and lens inside of Adobe Lightroom Classic. If you have any comments or questions, you can leave those below. Don't forget to subscribe and have an absolutely wonderful day.